Hey YouTube! So today we're going to be taking a break from the 496 stroker build, and I'm going to kind of show you what one of my actual work days kind of entails. So on my right here I've got a 150 Merc. It's a 2004, but it's just had a fresh rebuild. But after running it, you run it and then you kind of see what the issues are, and then that's when it's time to iron them out. Every new rebuild almost always has problems to sort out. This one, unfortunately, it's leaking oil from the pump, so I actually have to take it off the midsection because the oil pump's underneath and replace that. And it's also leaking from the water fuel separator. So I got those two issues to take care of on this engine. And beside me here is from a client, dropped this off. He picked it up. It's an 80 horsepower Merc. It's actually a 1989, so this engine is older than I am by quite a few years. But all he was told was that it needs new rings. We're gonna do a leak down test on it, and I'm gonna open it up and see whether or not it's salvageable. Hopefully it just needs new rings, but we'll know for sure when it's torn apart. Now, in order to take this thing off the midsection, I gotta make sure that I've got all my connections disconnected. That includes everything electrical as well as some of these water hoses. So I'm going to do that first. I'm going to get as much as I can, and then I'm going to start unbolting this. Then that'll give us access to the power head on its own, and from there we can do the necessary work that needs to be done. So I'm just going to get right into this. Now we have our power head separated from the midsection. Didn't really take a whole lot of work either. That there is our leaky oil pump. So we have to replace that. Unfortunately, it is underneath. Because this is a fresh rebuild as well, I will be reusing that base gasket. And that there is the water fuel separator. It's leaking from around the rim here, so we're just gonna replace the whole unit as well. I'm gonna start with replacing this water separator first, just because it's the easiest to access. So what you wanna do, take the hose off first. And then all that's holding it on is because my replacement part has the bracket, I'm just going to take it right off the bracket there. Take our replacement part, keeping the hardware off the old one. So these are the same screws. Button them up, put the hose back on, and of course just add a zip tie. Mechanic's best friend right here. Then these I can find, I usually just tighten them up and they'll come off themselves just like that. And simple as that. The water separator is replaced, and before we run it we're just gonna make sure that this one doesn't leak. Now what we want to do is replace this oil filter. Go ahead and take it off. Well, I figured out why that oil pump was leaking, and admittedly it was my fault. So down here is our old one, and this is our replacement. As you can see, our old one was actually lacking the oil seal altogether, so that'll do it. You have nothing to seal your oil, so it's all just gonna pour right out. Thankfully our new one does. I fitted it with the right O-rings already. Now all we're gonna do is put some gasket maker just on the O-rings, and then we're gonna put it back into our block, and then there should be no oil leak. The other thing too about these oil pumps with the old ones, so these turn within the pump, so you want to kind of make sure that that's in the correct position. It's just going to make your installation easier. This one here is a bit off, so I'm going to spin it. As you can see in there, they spins. So you just want to make sure that you're matching. Those look good to me, so now I'm going to put our gasket maker on and we'll put it back into the block. A little bit of this stuff goes a long way if you've ever used it. It's nice finding out why things happen or didn't happen, but at the same time, to me personally, I find it a little bit frustrating. Just the fact I didn't catch that the first time around, but I guess that goes to show you that even professionals can make mistakes. Just gonna spread it a little bit with my gloves, just onto the flat surface. You can get away with some other gasket stuff. I wouldn't silicone this. In the manual, it does say to use something, and we have had luck with this. And so if it works, don't bother switching it up, right? So now we're gonna take this, put in the block, looks like it's good to go. And we do have an oil seal, so it shouldn't leak. Now just like with the fuel water separator, we kept our old hardware. We're gonna be reusing that. And believe it or not, for the oil pump, you'd think this would have a torque spec, but it doesn't. So I just kind of go just by hand with it. Drive them up slowly first. Just on our setting number 1 there. Go nice and slow. You want to make sure that it's flush. And there we go. That all feels even, and I think we're good there. One last thing we want to check and make sure is that our mating surface for our base gasket is completely clean. Especially since we are reusing this old gasket, you want to get off any of this film that it is left behind. It feels off fairly easy. Want to make sure that it is dry as well. Itself is good to go. It's good to be mounted back up to our midsection. Now this last part before putting it on is just going to be prepping the base gasket. Again, this is reused. I wouldn't recommend this under normal circumstances, but the facts are this engine was just ran pretty much just to make sure that it runs and to try and iron out any of the issues. So the engine wasn't even run like 20-minute tops. But all metal gaskets, they usually have this sort of film which helps stick. You're going to want to make sure that you get all of this off. Thankfully, it does come off fairly easy, but this is what really helps make your seal. I know you're probably wondering, if it helps make the seal, then why am I pulling it off? Well, that's because this is done now, right? We've used it. Last thing you want to do is put something like that back on. What I am going to do is I'm going to use copper spray to make up for that. Some people they'll get a new metal gasket and they'll copper spray over it. But as you see with this stuff coming off, that's why you should not use copper spray on a new gasket, which a lot of people do. Sure, it works for them sometimes, but it's just really not worth the risk. The gasket should do what it's designed to do without any additional help. All the seal off of this gasket, at least on this side. I'm gonna just flip it over, have a look. That looks good. So what I'm gonna do is just pat it all down, make sure it is dry. other side. That looks to be good there. Now we're gonna take our copper spray gasket, just give a nice even coat. What I'm gonna do is 2 coats for each side. You're probably wondering why even reuse the base gasket instead of just buying a new one. Well, this is actually very expensive. I do believe this is over $100. And because the engine wasn't ran for very long, I think it should be okay. Again, this is not under any sort of normal circumstance. It's also fairly flat. And spraying the copper will pretty much, that stuff I just peeled off, the copper will make up for that and should help create the seal. Now we've cleaned our midsection up too, this is all dry, it's time to put the base gasket on. There are dowels that help you line this up so that your base gasket just sits nice where it should. So we have both surfaces clean and our gasket resprayed. There's the back, and here's our front. Nice and in place, just like that. Now it's time to mount the power head back onto the mid. Well, now we have our engine all hooked up, ready to run. So we're gonna see, just make sure that we've solved our issues. Gonna fill this with fuel, just make sure that it's no longer leaking. Looks like it's holding, it's not bubbling anywhere. There it is, max pressure. So we should be good to run. Well, I tried to start that 150 and the battery just didn't have enough juice. It ran for just a few seconds. And it didn't leak oil at all, so I do have high hopes. But for now, I've got the battery charging, and when it's good to go, I'm going to try it again. But for now, we'll do a leak down on this little guy, see what the numbers come up with. Then we're going to do our teardown, and that'll really show us what's going on with him and whether or not he's worth a rebuild. So we're going to jump to that while our battery charges, and then when that's done, we're going to try and fire up that 150 one more time. Here's cylinder number 1. Here's our cylinder number 2. As you can see, there's nothing really in that second cylinder, so that's going to be the problem when we open it up. Let's check the third one and see how it's doing. And last but not least, here's cylinder number 3. Now we have our crankcase off. This thing actually spins pretty nice, I'm surprised. But as we saw with the leak down test, it's pretty bad. Especially this cylinder here, number 2. So before I tear this down now, I just want to mark each connecting rod as a reference, each piston here, so then I know which cylinder it came out of. Want to hold on to the bearings too. I'll have a look at those, see whether or not they're reusable. I honestly think that someone's been in this engine before. There's I deal with enough of these to know that there's gasket maker and stuff like that that's not factory, which is on this engine. So someone's definitely been in it. It's interesting, like when something's rebuilt, it usually doesn't have issues for a long time. But having said that, this is an older engine, so I'm going to tear it apart now and see what it's really hiding. I'm not gonna lie, it really surprised me to see all of the pistons this rough. Deep scoring, I would not reuse any of these. Here's our number 2, that one was the issue. Compared to the other 2, you can see he's really bad. That one had, it really, like no compression. There was nothing on that leak down. Those are all pretty bad. Now it's time to show you the block itself. Might be hard to kind of videotape this, but I'm going to try my best. See all the scoring there, but what's interesting is you can also see cross hatching, which is also signs of this being rebuilt. Cylinder number 1. You can see the walls are pretty scored, but here's our number 2. That was the problem. This guy is just way too deep. Some of these scratches here. Not thinking this will be rebuildable without a re-sleeve, unfortunately for the customer. Especially machine shops have a really hard time with these. Because the pistons come through the bottom of the block as opposed to the top, you can't really get a bore straight through there. It's even hard to get the sleeves in with this type of motor. So for the money it would cost to repair this engine, it's not going to be worth it for my client, who I know he's just looking to have this repaired to try and sell it, but I know the cost of what these go for and what it would cost to repair, and it's just not going to be worth it for him, unfortunately. This also kind of a lesson as to what people will say sometimes online. Like, he was told it just needs new rings, but this needs all new sleeves and new pistons, which turns, more an affordable or cheaper job into a very expensive one. One that, again, it's not going to be worth it for him to bother fixing. All right, this thing is hopefully good to go. Hopefully it'll start for us. The battery's been charging, so we're gonna try it. Hopefully there's no oil leaks. We'll know really soon. As soon as this thing's running. If it was leaking the way it was before, it's all just gonna come out. But again, like we saw, that last oil pump didn't even have an oil seal, so I'm not surprised it was leaking the way it was. But it's definitely good to know. So, what have I got to lose? Let's fire her up. That may be all she's got for juice. Did sound good though. It's okay, you don't want to run it too long like this anyways, so it's got no water hooked up to it. You just want to make sure there's no oil leaks. Yeah, she's too dead. This battery's no good. It's time to replace it. It ran long enough to make sure it did what it needed to do. Let's see underneath how it looks. This is underneath the engine. This is where it's leaking from. Seems to be good. That's good. It tells us two things: that our base gasket's holding up, as well as our oil pump and oil seal. That's going to conclude today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that. A little bit of a change from the 496 build, I know, but at least you guys got to kind of see a bit of a glimpse into what it is I really do for work. Sometimes you find in life you're your own worst enemy. I kind of caused this issue on my own. But sometimes mistakes are good, because as long as you learn from them, So, what I'll never do again is forget that oil seal. And every time I put one in, it's going to come to mind now, did I put that in? It's just going to be something I double check. I've been doing this for almost 2 years. I've probably built damn near 50 of these, and I've not once had that happen. But there's a first for everything, right? As far as this, the 80 build, it's unfortunate for my customer. It's really unfortunate too, because there's a lot of good usable parts. Even though the engine's from 1989, there's still quite a bit of good stuff. The crank is good. What's that word I'm looking for? It's slipping me right now. The crankcase. The crankcase is still good too. That's all usable stuff. So when I contact him, we'll have to see what he wants to do with it. But for now, this one's good to go. And it's actually going to Nova Scotia. We do business kind of everywhere, including cross-border too. We do quite a bit of business in the States. As far as the 496 back there, it's a bit of a passion project, I'm doing it all on my spare time. I also do all my own editing and stuff. I know it's nothing spectacular, but it is still very time consuming. I appreciate the continued support, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really does, believe it or not, help the page. It helps with growth. And it's just good for me too, right? It's interesting to see that the stuff I'm putting out is actually reaching an audience. It's kind of a neat feeling. But I guess I'll conclude with that. I don't really have anything more to say. Thanks again. I appreciate each and every one of you. And we'll keep going with this as stuff happens.